Maya was a quiet girl with bright eyes that noticed everything around her. She lived with her mother in a small apartment on the edge of the city. Life was not easy for them, but Maya had learned to be strong and hopeful even in simple things. Her mother worked long hours cleaning rooms at one of the biggest hotels in the city. Sometimes, Maya went with her after school, waiting in a corner of the lobby with her books and notebooks while her mother worked. It was there, sitting silently and watching, that Maya had seen people of every kind: tourists, workers, rich visitors, and sometimes very important guests who walked with pride. On one such afternoon, the hotel was full of people because a charity event was taking place. The grand ballroom was decorated with golden lights, flowers, and shiny tables. Guests came in their finest clothes. Maya, who was sitting near the entrance with a little notebook in her hands, saw cameras flashing, reporters asking questions, and cars arriving one after another. She didn't fully understand the importance of the event, but she knew it was big. Everyone in the lobby looked excited as they whispered a single name: Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter was not just any guest. He was one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire whose face often appeared on television and in newspapers. People spoke of him as a man who had built his empire from nothing, a symbol of success. Maya had seen his picture before, but this was the first time she saw him in person. He walked into the lobby surrounded by assistants and bodyguards, smiling at the cameras. He wore a dark suit that looked perfectly made for him, and his presence drew attention from everyone in the room. Some people clapped, others rushed to shake his hand, and the hotel staff quickly bowed their heads in respect. Maya, however, looked at him differently. Her young eyes studied him not as a powerful man but as another human being. She noticed the way his smile faded the moment cameras turned away. She noticed how his eyes looked tired, almost worried, even as he waved to people. Something about him felt different from the happy image the world seemed to celebrate. Maya tilted her head, curious, and continued to observe quietly. The evening grew busier. Guests entered the ballroom, speeches were given, and music filled the air. Maya kept her notebook open, scribbling little sketches and writing short sentences. She had always liked to write down what she saw, as if her pen was her way of making sense of the world. But that day, her writing was not just about dresses or lights. She was writing about Mr. Carter, the man who looked powerful yet strangely troubled. Hours passed, and the lobby grew quieter as most people went inside the ballroom. Maya's mother, still at work, came to check on her and handed her a sandwich before rushing off again. Maya ate slowly, her eyes still wandering around. When she looked again at Mr. Carter, she saw something unusual. He had stepped away from the crowd and stood alone for a moment near a hallway, speaking softly to one of his men. The expression on his face was no longer charming, it was serious, almost tense. Maya remembered the things she had overheard at the hotel in the past. She had once listened, without meaning to, when two men in suits whispered about deals and secrets they thought no one else could hear. She had seen papers left on tables, full of numbers and names she didn't understand, but the tone of the conversations had stayed in her mind. Words like trouble, loss, and cover it up had repeated in those talks. Though she was just a girl, she understood one simple thing: things were not as perfect as people believed. As she watched Mr. Carter that evening, those memories returned. She connected the dots in her own way. This man, praised by everyone, might be in bigger trouble than people realized. Her small hand moved quickly, tearing a piece of paper from her notebook. She hesitated for a long moment, her heart beating fast. Then, with determination, she wrote in clear letters, "You're in big trouble." Her fingers trembled as she folded the note. She was just a child, and he was the most powerful man in the room. What if he laughed? What if he got angry? But something deep inside told her it was the right thing to do. Sometimes, children see truths that adults ignore. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. Mr. Carter began walking back toward the ballroom, and his path brought him close to where Maya sat. People rushed to greet him, but in that brief moment, he looked down and noticed her. A small girl with wide eyes, holding a folded paper tightly in her hands. He slowed down, curious, and leaned slightly toward her. Maya quickly stretched out her hand and pressed the paper into his palm. For a second, time seemed to stop. Mr. Carter raised his eyebrows in surprise, but before he could ask anything, his assistants called him, and he walked on. He slipped the note into his pocket without looking, still wearing the practiced smile for the waiting cameras. Maya watched him disappear into the ballroom, her heart pounding in her chest. She wondered if he would ever read it, or if it would be thrown away like any other meaningless paper. Inside the ballroom, the evening continued with speeches and laughter, but Mr. Carter's mind was no longer in the same place. When he finally pulled the paper from his pocket and read the short, sharp words written in a child's hand, he froze. His eyes widened for a moment, and then he carefully folded it again, hiding it in his jacket. No one around him noticed the change in his expression. Only he knew that the note, as simple as it was, carried a strange weight. Meanwhile, Maya sat quietly in the lobby, unaware of the storm she had just stirred inside one of the most powerful men in the world. To her, it was just a warning. To him, it was a mystery that would not let him rest. Maya never thought of herself as someone important. She was just a girl who liked to write in her notebook and listen carefully to the world around her. But after giving Mr. Carter the note, she could not stop thinking about what she had done. That night, as she walked home with her mother, she kept silent. The city lights shone brightly on the streets, but Maya's mind was full of questions. Would he even care about the note? Would he think of her as a silly child? Or would he somehow understand what she was trying to say? Her mother, tired after the long shift at the hotel, noticed her daughter's silence but did not ask. She held Maya's hand as they walked up the stairs of their small building. Their apartment was small but warm, filled with the smell of home-cooked food and old books her mother had collected from second-hand stores. Maya sat on her bed, looking at her notebook. She wanted to write down everything she had seen and heard, but her heart was too restless. She remembered every detail of Mr. Carter's face, the way his smile disappeared when no one was watching. She had seen something that others had missed. Days passed, and Maya returned to her usual routine. School in the morning, homework in the afternoon, and evenings spent waiting at the hotel while her mother worked. She carried her notebook everywhere, like a secret friend who kept her company. But inside her heart, she carried another secret, the things she had overheard long before she ever saw Mr. Carter face to face. One evening, months earlier, Maya had been sitting quietly in a corner of the hotel lobby when two men in expensive suits entered. They didn't notice her, because to them, she was just a little girl with books. They spoke in low voices, but Maya's sharp ears caught pieces of their conversation. "We can't let him know yet," one of the men whispered. "If this gets out, it will ruin everything," the other replied. Maya remembered those words because they sounded heavy, like a stone being dropped in water. At first, she thought they were talking about something ordinary, maybe a business deal. But then she heard more. "The numbers don't match. The money is gone. We'll fix it before he notices. Just keep it quiet." The men left quickly after that, but the words stayed in Maya's mind. She didn't fully understand the meaning, but she knew it was not good. People with power, people with money, always tried to look perfect in front of others. Yet here were two men speaking of secrets that could destroy everything. On another day, while waiting for her mother, Maya had seen papers left on a table in the lounge. She had no reason to touch them, but the bold letters on the top caught her eye: "Confidential." She only glanced for a moment before a hotel worker picked them up, but that glimpse showed her names, dates, and large amounts of money written in rows. She did not know what those numbers meant, but she could tell it was important. Over time, little pieces began to fit together in her mind. She saw men who looked nervous, she overheard conversations cut short the moment someone walked past, and she noticed how often the name Mr. Carter came up in those whispers. Everyone outside the hotel spoke of him as if he was untouchable, but Maya knew there was a storm quietly building behind closed doors. She didn't tell anyone, not even her mother. Her mother worked so hard just to keep food on the table, and Maya didn't want to add to her worries. Instead, she kept her thoughts inside her notebook. Sometimes she wrote them as poems, other times as short notes. But when she finally saw Mr. Carter himself, standing tall yet looking tired, she felt the need to do something more. That was why she had written the note. After that day, she often wondered whether he had read it. At school, while her classmates played, she would sometimes imagine his reaction. Maybe he had laughed. Maybe he had thrown it away. Or maybe just maybe he had felt the same weight she had sensed in his eyes. One afternoon, as she sat again in the hotel lobby, she saw Mr. Carter's picture on the television screen above the reception desk. The news anchor spoke about his company's great success, his charity work, and his growing influence in the business world. The guests in the lobby nodded in admiration. But Maya looked closer at his face on the screen. Even in that image, she could see it the same tiredness, the same shadow that no one else seemed to notice. Her mother came to sit beside her for a short break. She smiled at Maya, brushing her hair gently. "You always look like you're thinking of something important," her mother said softly. "What goes on in that little head of yours?" Maya hesitated. She wanted to tell her, but she held back. Instead, she smiled and said, "Just writing stories in my mind." Her mother kissed her forehead and went back to work. That night, Maya wrote in her notebook again. She didn't write about school or friends. She wrote about Mr. Carter. She described the moment she gave him the note, how heavy her heart felt, and how his eyes had changed when he looked at her. She wrote that sometimes even the strongest people needed someone to remind them of the truth, even if that reminder came from a child. Unknowingly, she was shaping her thoughts into something bigger. Maya did not realize it, but her small action had already reached further than she imagined. Mr. Carter had read the note. He had felt its weight. And somewhere, deep inside, it had stirred a question he could no longer ignore. For Maya, life continued as usual. But for Mr. Carter, the little girl's words had planted a seed of doubt, a seed of fear, and perhaps even a seed of hope. The world still saw him as powerful, but now he carried in his pocket a secret note that whispered to him in the voice of a child, "You're in big trouble." Mr. Carter was a man who had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing had shaken him quite like the small note he had received from Maya. In front of the cameras, he continued to smile, give speeches, and shake hands with important guests, but inside his chest, the words kept echoing. "You're in big trouble." It was such a short sentence, yet it felt heavier than the long reports his advisors handed him every day. For 2 nights after the charity event, he could not sleep properly. He replayed the scene in his mind over and over, the serious expression of the little girl, the way she slipped the folded paper into his hand without fear, and the childlike handwriting that carried such boldness. Who was she? How could she know anything about his life? Most importantly, what exactly did she mean? On the 3rd day, he decided he could not ignore it anymore. He returned to the hotel, but not as a celebrated guest. This time, he came quietly, with only one assistant, hoping to find some trace of the girl. He remembered her small frame, the notebook in her lap, and the determined look in her eyes. As he walked through the lobby, his sharp eyes scanned every corner. At first, there was nothing. Then, in a quiet corner near the lounge, he saw her again. She was sitting with a book in her lap, waiting patiently, just as before. For a moment, he almost turned away. What would people think if they saw a billionaire speaking with a child he did not know? But his curiosity was stronger than his hesitation. He walked toward her. Maya noticed him immediately. She froze for a moment, surprised, but then closed her notebook slowly. "Do you remember me?" he asked gently, lowering his voice so that no one else would hear. "Yes," she replied, her tone calm, though her heart raced inside her chest. "You gave me something," he said. "A note." Maya nodded. She looked at him with the same serious eyes, not giggling or nervous like other children might be in front of a famous man. That calmness surprised him. "What did you mean?" he asked after a pause. "Why did you write that?" Maya thought carefully before answering. She knew this was not a game. "Because it's true," she said softly. "You're in big trouble. Maybe you don't know it yet, but I heard things about your people, the ones who work for you." Mr. Carter narrowed his eyes. He leaned closer, his voice now almost a whisper. "What things?" She looked down at her notebook, flipping through the pages. There were scribbles, half-sentences, and drawings. She pointed to one page where she had written words she remembered: loss, numbers, don't tell him. "I heard men talking about money," she explained. "They said you didn't know. They said if people found out, it would ruin everything." I didn't understand everything, but I remember their words. For a long moment, Mr. Carter said nothing. He felt a chill run through him. Those words matched the doubts he had been carrying secretly. He had noticed little signs: projects costing more than planned, reports with numbers that didn't quite add up, trusted people who gave excuses too easily. But until now, he had pushed those doubts aside. Hearing them echoed by a child who had no reason to lie shook him deeply. "You're telling me the truth?" he asked firmly. Maya met his eyes without blinking. "Yes. I only wrote the note because I thought maybe you didn't know. And if you don't know, then you should. Because if I could hear it, maybe others can too." Her words, simple yet sharp, cut through the wall of pride he had built around himself. For years, he had been praised as a genius, a man who controlled everything. Yet here was a little girl reminding him that even the strongest man could be blind to dangers around him. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked softly. Maya shook her head. "You've given me something no one else had the courage to give," he said. "The truth." From that day, something changed in Mr. Carter. He could no longer ignore the whispers in his mind. He started paying closer attention, asking quiet questions, and looking at reports with sharper eyes. He began to notice the cracks more clearly: the small mistakes that were not mistakes at all, the missing amounts that could not be explained, the fake smiles of people who claimed to be loyal. At the same time, he continued to visit the hotel, always pretending it was just for business. But secretly, he wanted to see Maya again. She reminded him of honesty, of the raw truth he had lost while living in a world of power and money. Each time they spoke, she shared small things she had observed. She was not an expert, not trained in business, yet her words carried a purity that made him see things differently. One evening, Maya told him, "People talk more freely when they think no one is listening. That's how I hear things. I don't try to, but it happens." He nodded, impressed. "And you remember everything?" "Almost everything," she said with a small smile. For the first time in years, Mr. Carter laughed genuinely. "You're sharper than most of the people I pay," he admitted. But the situation was no laughing matter. The more he dug into his company, the more he realized Maya was right. People he had trusted for years were hiding things from him. Money was disappearing, deals were being twisted, and his empire was not as solid as the world believed. The trouble was real. Still, he could not simply accuse his team without proof. That was dangerous. The men who betrayed him were clever, and they would not give up their secrets easily. He needed to move carefully, quietly. And strangely enough, the only person he felt he could truly trust was the little girl with the notebook. Meanwhile, Maya did not fully understand how deep the problems went. She only knew that she had given a warning, and now the billionaire was listening. But in her heart, she also felt something else, a growing sense of responsibility. She was just a child, yet her words had pushed a powerful man to see the truth. It was frightening, but also empowering. Every time they spoke, she became more aware of how much weight her simple note carried. And every time he listened, Mr. Carter felt both more unsettled and more determined. For years, he had thought of himself as untouchable. Now, he realized that even the richest man could be brought down by lies from within. The connection between them grew quietly, built not on wealth or power, but on honesty. Maya had no reason to flatter him or to hide the truth. And he, for the first time, had someone who looked at him not as a billionaire, but as a man who needed to face his own reality. And so, the days moved forward. To the world, Mr. Carter remained the smiling, successful billionaire. But behind closed doors, he was a man carrying a child's warning in his heart like a secret flame. And that flame was about to lead him to decisions that would change his life forever. The note from Maya never left Mr. Carter's mind, and neither did her calm but firm voice when she explained what she had overheard. He had spent years building his empire, years being admired by the public, but now he understood that trouble was growing within his own walls. It was not just a careless mistake or a small error, it was something deeper, something dangerous. If a child could hear whispers and connect the dots, then the truth was not far from breaking into the open. He knew he had to act. But he also knew one wrong move could make everything collapse. If he accused the wrong person, they would cover their tracks and vanish. If he spoke too loudly, word would spread, and the same people who celebrated him today would turn their backs on him tomorrow. So, he chose to move in silence. At first, he began with the numbers. Every night, after long public meetings and bright interviews, he returned to his private office and pulled out old files. He read financial reports with fresh eyes. He compared figures that once looked normal but now felt suspicious. Slowly, he started seeing the hidden patterns. Amounts that disappeared and then reappeared under different names. Projects that cost double what they should have. Contracts signed with companies that did not even exist on paper. The deeper he looked, the more his heart sank. This was not a small mistake. It was betrayal. And it was not by strangers, it was by people he had trusted the most. Some of his closest advisors, men who had walked beside him for years, were quietly stealing from him. They were using his empire to build their own secret wealth, believing that no one, not even Mr. Carter himself, would notice. For years, he had been too busy to see it. He was traveling, giving speeches, shaking hands with world leaders. He trusted his team to handle the details. But while he was looking outward, they were digging holes under his feet. He decided he needed proof. So, he began watching them, but not in the open. He hired a private investigator, someone who owed him a favor and would not ask questions. He gave only one instruction: find out the truth, but do it quietly. At the same time, he kept meeting Maya. Their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they sat in the hotel lounge, sometimes in the quiet corner of the garden outside. To others, it looked like a kind man speaking with a curious child. But in truth, he was listening to her unusual way of seeing the world. She was not giving him business advice, yet her words opened his eyes. People show their real face when they think no one is watching, she told him one evening. That's when you learn who they are. Her simple observation stayed with him. He began to notice small things about his advisors. One avoided eye contact when asked about numbers. Another laughed too loudly when giving excuses. Another quickly changed the subject whenever a certain project was mentioned. These were things he had once ignored, but now he saw them clearly. At times, he wondered why he trusted Maya so much. She was just a girl, not an expert or a leader. Yet her honesty was something rare in his world. Everyone else around him wanted something: money, power, or favor. She wanted nothing. She only gave him truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That made her words more valuable than any report he received from his expensive advisors. As weeks passed, the private investigator returned with reports. They confirmed what Maya had heard. Millions had been moved secretly through false accounts. Contracts were signed with hidden companies controlled by his own executives. And worse, a few politicians had been quietly paid to protect these activities. The betrayal was deeper than he thought. The knowledge weighed heavily on him. Some nights, he sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights through the tall windows. The world outside still admired him. Newspapers still called him a symbol of success. But he knew the truth now. If these secrets came out on their own, he would not just lose money, he would lose everything. His name, his reputation, and the trust of millions of people. He thought of Maya's words again. "You're in big trouble." She had been right. The trouble was not coming, it was already here. One evening, he called a meeting with the very advisors he now knew were betraying him. They entered the room confidently, with polite smiles and practiced greetings. But as they spoke, Mr. Carter remained silent, only watching them. Their words sounded empty now. He could see the falsehood in every smile. After the meeting, one of them approached him privately. "Sir, is everything all right? You've been quieter than usual." Mr. Carter forced a small smile. "I'm just thinking," he said calmly, "about the future." Inside, however, he was not calm. He was deciding what to do next. He had two choices. The first was to cover everything up. If he removed a few people quietly, erased a few files, and replaced the numbers, no one might ever know. His empire would look perfect again, at least from the outside. The second choice was far more dangerous: confront the truth openly. Admit the mistakes, remove the corrupt people, and take responsibility, even if it meant losing some of his power. The first choice promised safety but no peace. The second choice promised risk but also freedom. Maya's words kept returning to him. She had said, "If I could hear it, maybe others can too." That thought shook him. If a young girl could see the cracks, then eventually the world would see them too. And when that happened, hiding would not save him. One night, after walking Maya home with her mother's permission, he stopped at the corner of the street. Maya looked up at him and asked, "Did you find out what you needed?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. I found out more than I wanted to." "What will you do now?" she asked. He looked at her, surprised by the weight of the question coming from someone so young. But he knew she deserved an answer. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I can't ignore it anymore. If I pretend it doesn't exist, the trouble will only grow bigger." Maya nodded, as if she already knew. "Sometimes the hardest thing is the right thing." Her words, simple as they were, stayed with him as he drove away that night. The decision was forming in his heart. He could not protect his empire by hiding lies. He had to face them. It would not be easy. It would bring storms. But perhaps, in the end, it was the only way to save not just his empire, but himself. The billionaire who had once believed he controlled everything was now learning that even he was not untouchable. And the lesson had come not from a team of experts, but from a little girl with honest eyes and a simple note. The decision weighed heavily on Mr. Carter, but the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Hiding the truth might save his image for a short time, but it would not give him peace. He could not live with the fear that one day the secrets would escape and destroy everything in an instant. He had built his empire on hard work, vision, and determination. Allowing it to rot from the inside would mean all those years were wasted. The little girl's note had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. Honesty was the strongest foundation of all. He spent days preparing. Quietly, he gathered proof. The investigators' reports, the false contracts, the money trails, all of it was collected in a secure file. He called a few people he still trusted completely, men and women who had served him with loyalty for years and had no hand in the betrayal. To them, he revealed the truth. Their faces showed shock at first, then anger, and finally respect when he explained what he planned to do. "This won't be easy," one of them warned. "They will fight back. And the world may not forgive you quickly." Mr. Carter nodded. "I know. But if I stay silent, I am no better than the people who betrayed me." The day of the board meeting arrived. It was a grand room with polished wood, shining lights, and a long table where his top executives gathered. They entered with confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. Some chatted about new deals, others flipped through reports. Mr. Carter sat at the head of the table, silent, his hands folded in front of him. When the room settled, he stood. His deep voice filled the room. "For years, this company has been a symbol of growth and success. People believe in us because they believe in me. But today, I must tell you something very different. I have discovered betrayal within these walls." A murmur rose immediately. Eyes darted around the table. Some looked confused, others nervous. He continued, his voice calm but strong. "Money has been stolen. Deals have been twisted. Lies have been told. And some of the very people in this room are responsible." The air turned heavy. A few executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One man tried to speak, but Mr. Carter raised his hand. "Do not deny it. I have proof." He placed the thick file on the table and pushed it forward. The room fell silent as the papers revealed the hidden truth: documents, bank records, signed contracts linking them to the theft. No one could argue. The evidence was undeniable. One of the men stood, his face pale. "You can't do this. If you make this public, it will ruin everything. Investors will leave, the media will destroy your name." Mr. Carter looked at him firmly. "No. If I stay silent, that will ruin everything. I would rather lose money than lose my honor." For the first time in years, he felt truly free as he spoke those words. He dismissed the guilty men from their positions on the spot. Their protests echoed in the room, but they had no power left. Security escorted them out, leaving behind only the sound of heavy footsteps fading down the hall. News spread quickly, as it always does. Within hours, reporters filled the streets outside his company headquarters. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward, and questions flew like arrows. Many expected Mr. Carter to deny the scandal or remain silent. Instead, he did the unexpected. He stood before the world and told the truth. "Yes," he admitted openly, "there has been corruption in my company. Yes, I trusted the wrong people. But today, I take responsibility. Those who betrayed us are gone, and I will rebuild with honesty and strength. We will face the storm openly, because only by facing the truth can we earn back the trust we have lost." The crowd erupted. Some reporters looked stunned, others impressed. News channels quickly broadcast his words, and people everywhere reacted. Many were shocked that a man of his status would admit such flaws. Some critics attacked him, calling him careless. But many more respected his courage. In a world where powerful people often hid their mistakes, Mr. Carter's honesty shone brightly. In the weeks that followed, he worked harder than ever. He rebuilt his team with loyal and skilled people. He opened the company's records for public inspection, proving he had nothing to hide. Slowly, the storm began to settle. Investors who had feared the worst started returning, inspired by his transparency. Ordinary people admired him even more, saying he had shown real strength not by pretending to be perfect, but by admitting his faults and fixing them. Through it all, one face never left his mind: Maya's. The little girl who had given him the courage to face the truth. Without her, he might still be blind, still trusting people who were quietly destroying him. One evening, when the dust of the scandal had begun to clear, he returned to the hotel where it all began. Maya was there, as always, with her notebook in her lap. When she saw him, her eyes widened with surprise. "You came back," she said softly. He smiled, a real smile this time, not the practiced one he wore for cameras. "Yes. I had to see you." Maya tilted her head. "Did you fix it?" He nodded. "I did. It wasn't easy, but I faced it. You were right, I was in big trouble. But your note gave me the strength to deal with it." Her face lit up with a small smile. "I'm glad." He sat beside her, lowering his voice. "You know, people pay millions for advice, but the most important advice I received came from you. Never forget how powerful your voice is, Maya. Even the smallest voice can change the path of the biggest man." Maya held her notebook tightly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had never thought of herself as powerful. She was just a girl who noticed things. But now she understood that truth was powerful, no matter who spoke it. Before leaving, Mr. Carter handed her a small envelope. Inside was not money, but a scholarship letter. "This is for you," he said. "Education will give your voice an even bigger reach. Use it well." Maya's eyes filled with tears of joy, but she quickly wiped them away. She promised him she would study hard and keep writing her thoughts. As Mr. Carter walked away, he felt lighter than he had in years. He had faced betrayal, he had faced the truth, and he had survived. More than that, he had changed. The world still called him a billionaire, but he knew that the greatest wealth he now carried was wisdom, the wisdom to listen, to be honest, and to value even the smallest voices around him. And somewhere in the city, a young girl sat with her notebook, knowing that her simple act of courage had sparked a change that reached far beyond what she had ever imagined. The story of a billionaire and a little girl had become a story of truth, courage, and the reminder that no one is too small to make a difference.